myself. So I'm a freelance software / data, machine learning, software engineer. I primarily work in the Java space, but I also do other programming languages, and so I like to call myself a polyglot developer as opposed to a Java developer. So in my day job, I do all of the things, or many of the things that's mentioned there on the slides. I know a lot of buzzwords. But in my free time, I also do a lot of things like community stuff, which also you see there, including speaking at conferences like this, supporting open source projects and products like Grakn, and you'll see throughout the rest of the journey other things that I do. But let's not delve into this more and see what we have further. So let's get started. It's a two-piece talk, and it's my journey to the two products. Basically, it's just one product, but the two aspects of the same product: Grakn server and Graql, the language. And I've facilitated this journey by introducing two imaginative characters by the name Al, and you'll see the next character in the next slide. And Al, as you can see here, is a developer turned DevOps engineer, although he writes code all the time. That's what he claims, and he says. And if you see, I will actually share this journey with Al, so you will hear what I have been doing, and you'll hear Al's reaction as well. And some of the things would be like a quick introduction to Graql VM. If some of you don't know what it is, you might be familiar with the traditional JVMs, but maybe not Graql VM. We'll show some performance measurements. If you've been to this morning's talk, I think there was a strong highlight on performance by Heikel. So there's a little bit of a connection there in this presentation. We'll cover some benefits of all the things we'll be talking. And also, you'll want to know how to do this, like how to apply, right? So some resources as well. The next part of the talk is going to be about Graql and Jazz, who's a data scientist and an NLP expert, among other things. She's going to go with us through this journey, and we're going to be doing this experimental exercise of translating English to Graql and Graql to English, and maybe we even have some demos to show, provided I can rest my hand and type. I think Archie's going to help me with that. So to facilitate the slides, because it's possible the slides are not very clear on the screen, or you want to keep pace with me, I have a bit.ly link. Please go there. If you click on there, you got a link to a PDF, and you can quickly see all the slides that you see now on the screen on your handheld device. So I'm going to wait for a few seconds for you to take down the name of the link. The long version of the link is at the bottom of the slides. Don't use that. Use the short version, or you can use the QR code, and that'll take you to the GitHub repo, which gives you the link to the slides right from there. And raise of hands if people have already started going to the site and got themselves onto it. Okay, great. Should I wait for a few more seconds for the rest of you to, okay. This is really helpful because I might tend to go fast or slow, or sometimes the images might not be as clear as in the slides as on the screen. So this is just to make up for some of those things. So there is a folder called presentations. Please click in there because the link will take you to the top level folder. You have to still go in there. And then once you click on the hyperlink that says presentation or slides, it should take you to the PDF and you should be in. So I'm going to just move further from here because I think most of you are on there. Perfect. All right, so before we get even started with the talk, I want to really thank the organizers. And these are just names I'm going to pull out of the hat. I remember last year, I spoke to Thomas in July. He said, or in June, he said, I'd like you to come to our conference. We're going to organize a conference, and you're one of the selected speakers. And I was like, yay, that's good. And 8 months later, that's a reality now. So I did not envision, just like Heikel was saying this morning, I did not envision it was going to be like this. It was going to be so cool. And I want to thank all of these people. But we're not going to do it that way. I'd like you to all give a round of applause. I'm going to join you. I'm doing this simply because I'm involved in organizing conferences myself, and I help them out. And I know it's a monumental endeavor to do this, and it's not easy. I know how much effort I had to put in to put this talk together. So putting a conference is like maybe 30, 40 times that, or maybe more. So Just quickly also thank everybody else. I usually thank the developers who have helped me come through with my journey all the way till here. But I also want to thank you because you could have been into the other room or somewhere else or called it a day because it's nearly end of the presentation. So thank you very much for entrusting me with your time. A quick disclaimer. Everything that I'm going to be sharing here are my ideas and my thoughts. None of this is silver bullet. Don't go take it literally and try it out in production and bring your system down. And there are rough edges, there are inaccuracies. They've just been done in a week's time or several months' time, but few hours a day every other week. So it's not production ready to use, but it's a great thing to start thinking about. And if things are not clear, please come and ask me. I'll try to help you and explain further. I do this citation because I've used images and artifacts in this presentation from various sources. I don't want to disrespect those authors. They remain the actual authors and creators of the images and artifacts. So without any further ado, let's start with this. So I'm having a conversation with Al, who we introduced earlier. He's a DevOps engineer. Actually, he's a developer turned DevOps engineer. And just a little bit about Al is he is responsible for certain things. He has got certain goals. He likes to do certain things. And he wants to make his users happy. And he wants to build up and set up systems that are highly responsive, highly reliable, low latency. He doesn't want to do a lot of maintenance on them. And he wants to work on systems that are easy to learn and share that knowledge across. And so you can already see from all of these points where performance, productivity, efficiency, all of this come into play. And he has to do this with an element of pragmatism, right? Because he could go endlessly into the graph and get lost and not do the right things. So I was actually asking him, so how does he use Grakn? So he says, well, he runs it on the JVM, and he just uses the JVM everybody else uses. Everybody familiar with Java, JVM technology in this room? I have some resources at the bottom which will tell you what JVM is. So I said, great. So he knows that Grakn runs on a stack like this. You have a hardware or a server or a laptop. You have some operating system that runs on there. You install Java, in this case Java 8, because that's what Grakn supports. And then you have the apps that Grakn Labs provides. You can run on them. And you can get your Java from any Java vendor. And it works out of the box. But I said, but have you tried running Graql VM? And he says, what is Graql VM? So I said, well, this is what Graql VM is. It's a fork of the JVM. It's based on OpenJDK, so it's the same Java that you install, and also it's available for Java 8 and 11 in case versions are an issue for you. One of the things I'm asking you this is because since you're interested in performance, this is primarily purposed around high performance. It's got the JVM mode, so it works out of the box, so you install this, and just like you would install a JVM or a JDK, it would work out of the box. So anything you run on it would run just like the other instances and environments. In addition to that, you've got a native image mode. We'll cover a little bit on what that is, and a polyglot VM mode, which we won't cover, but there are resources at the bottom of the slides which will tell you more, but you can also talk to me later on about it. So he doesn't know a part of the stack when you install Graql VM. He knows that the Graql VM works out of the box when you install it in the JVM mode. But there is something called a native image builder, which we won't cover in detail, but there are resources in here, which actually changes the environment a bit, the space a bit. You then don't need Java anymore. You don't need any JDK dependencies anymore because it builds a binary that works and runs directly on your operating system. So that is actually really good for people who work in the DevOps area because then they can package that into a Docker container really quickly. Those Docker containers are compact and they're useful. So I said, well, you don't want to just choose a technology just because I'm suggesting. Have we done any kinds of measurements? And he asks me the same question as well. I said, yes, I have been measuring running Grakn, and then this is what I do. I will measure a product on a technology, and I'll start off with seeing how quickly that product starts up. So that's the startup time measurement. And I did that early to mid-2019. That's when I started to get to know the good folks from Grakn Labs. I think Thomas was the first person I met. Then it was James, who's not in the room here. Joshua was someone I met online. For the last 8 months, we've been messaging online on the Slack channel and discuss, and now on Discord. And so I did my analysis, and I said, hey, this is the graph I get when I run the various versions of Grakn all the way from 1.4.3. That was the first version, right? Or was there an earlier one? All the way through 1.5.7, and it doesn't look, it's improving very well, and it looks, it is a bit slow than I'm thinking it should be, right? So that was what I did when I started measuring startup times of the Grakn server itself. But then I also started measuring, if you put it in a Docker container and you run it, now it's actually getting a bit worse from 1.4.3 to 1.5.7. So I think that wasn't very good. So I shared this information in a constructive way, and my intent was to help improve. I said, well, why don't we revisit that again in February, which was early this month because I was preparing for the talk. And actually, to my surprise, and I did get to know later on that is actually halved in time. In startup, that's a massive improvement. That's because Joshua says that he has actually worked on his team. The rest of his team has worked on this improvement. And actually, this is a really great improvement. So I would recommend everybody to start using 1.6.0 onwards because it starts up really quickly. It's half the startup time, which is, what is it, 50%, 100%, 50% improvement. And the container startup time is not bad, actually. Oh, sorry, this is actually the slide where I'm comparing Grakn running on the various versions of the JVM. And the first one is the OpenJDK, and the other one's the Graql VM versions. So the startup times don't show a deterioration here or much improvement here. But it's still good to see that if you use certain versions of Graql VM, they are faster, has a slightly faster startup time than if you use just the OpenJDK. Again, I have not compared this with every versions of Java out there. There might be versions of Java JDK that might outbeat this, so you might want to check this out yourself. But these were the versions I used myself. And when I did that with the container across the different versions of Grakn, I saw that startup time has actually also dropped, which is also good. So both the container and the non-container versions actually improved in startup time. And this is actually a great sign because if you're using something, and we will see later on why this is important and useful and in which use case it's useful. This was another graph of all the startup times of the containers across the various versions of Graql VM. So actually, you got to see I've got multiple combinations of comparisons I'm making. And that's why the slides that you have to hand is useful because you can actually see through what comparisons I'm talking about. So that's not enough because that's just the startup time, right? We want to see if the program is really working fast. And so what do? So yes, we benchmark the performance of the server. And Joshua again helped me out with the project that they had internally, which was an open source project, and helped me set it up, and I started running it. And these are the benchmark results. So we saw that these are a bunch of queries that have been running on using the benchmark. The queries run different loads of volumes. You can, and so this was a low volume set of queries. For the same queries, we saw that the OpenJDK versions worked better than the Graql VM ones, and you can see from the graph. And here, of course, higher graph means better. But when we noticed that when we introduced the same queries on Graql VM and OpenJDK with higher volume, that means more queries were thrown at the server, or queries were thrown at a bigger volume of data, we saw that actually Graql VM does better than OpenJDK. In many instances, there's one instance where they're doing equally good. So again, these are really good signs. Again, I'm not going to be saying use this and don't use that, but you can already see from the use cases, you can choose one from the other based on what your personal situations or your organizational situation is. So earlier I mentioned a little bit about what native image is. Native image is converting a Java app, which is a jar file, into a binary that runs on your system without using any dependencies, without using any Java dependencies. You don't need to install any JDK. And so that, and such binaries are much smaller in size. They start up really quickly, and in theory, they have a better runtime performance. That means if you converted a Grakn app into one of those native image binaries, In theory, it should run or start up quickly and run quickly. We have yet to discover that, and we haven't fully benchmarked that, so I don't have the results. But that's something to do. The tooling is provided to do that. So, Al had a lot of these questions. I said, well, here's the link to all the resources. Please go and find out. And then actually, this goes to you as well. You have the same resources and links. Tell me how you find, and if there are any issues, I'm going to help you fix them. So let's recap a little bit about benefits. From the JVM perspective, it works out of the box. It's a performant system. It helps you with faster startup times. It gives you compact dependency-free images. There's a free community version, just like Grakn has free community version. It's developed in the open source. It's widely accepted and has a good community outreach. From the infrastructure perspective, because that's where Al is interested in, it actually helps improve your response time, right? Because if your app starts up really quickly and performs quickly on a node of servers, then you're not frustrated with the wait time. It's also dependency-free, and the end artifacts are easy to port and create Docker images from, and there are multiple platforms are supported as well, and there are regular updates available for this. So with that, I'd like to also make a quick disclaimer that performance is an art and a science, and I can't claim any of these figures, and I'm not trying to claim them either. You want to not take any of these figures literally. You want to go and do your own measurements. I have provided the scripts, the knowledge, the resources available, and if still that is less, ask me, because I'll go digging out for more. But don't take these literally and just go to your workplace, install it in a production system, and slow it down even more. I don't want to take responsibility for that, but I want to educate you and share you with the information on how you can actually use critical thinking and apply this knowledge that I'm sharing with you. So some of the use cases would be, if you're using a single instance, who runs Grakn on their laptop? Okay, so maybe in your case, Heikel, yours is a different case. You need to do both of these. Yeah. In your case, maybe your startup time is not that of an issue, because if it starts up 10 seconds a little later, you can still wait because you're the only person using it. But if you're using instances where there's a whole load of people waiting for a response time from the server, you want to start thinking about startup times, because if your container dies, if your server dies, then another one needs to come up real quickly, and you can't be affording to wait 20 seconds when actually 10 seconds is still a long wait. So if you look at all these points here, if you're a single instance user, maybe in the short run it's not big of a deal. Maybe for the runtime performance is a good benefit. But if you're a multi-instance cluster user, then all of these things on the right, to your right, are actually going to make more sense. Well, then we also have this, that being wrong is not a bad thing, right? We learn in school that being wrong is a bad thing. So if we got our performance numbers wrong, if we got our critical thinking wrong, if we got our judgments wrong, then we can backtrack and see where did they go wrong, what went wrong, right? I use Feynman's quotes a lot to support my thinking. So I've been rattling a lot about resources all this while. If you want to take a screenshot of this, but you already have the slides, these are the two links you need to find out how you can run Grakn on a high-performance server or high-performance environment. There are Docker images there that are ready to use, both on Mac OS and Linux. And give me your feedback, or go to this link and put some stars on the repo. That'll be really, really helpful. All of this is open source. I commit on a regular basis, and if you follow me on GitHub, then you can see some of the changes I'm making regularly on this repo. So with that, Al has started throwing lots more questions at me, and I was thinking, I can't answer any more questions because we are nearly halfway through the talk, right? So we need to buck up because we have another person waiting for us to chat to us. So I just shared the same links and resources that I've been chatting to you about with Al, and then I just moved out. So here's what happened. Just as about to leave, this is what he does. He says, choose. If you're all familiar with the movie Matrix. So I had to do the smart thing and say pass, because I thought this was the wrong point in the script. He should have asked me right in the beginning when I entered the server room, not now. So I did that, and I was just leaving. And some of the things I had in my mind was, what was he trying to throw at us? That wasn't even part of our script that we had when we were trying to converse about running Grakn servers and performance scripts and all that stuff. So as I was walking out of the server room, and I passed by the lobby, in the lobby there's Jazz, who I introduced earlier, our data scientist. And she starts talking to me, and a little bit about Jazz again. She's all about data science, NLP, keen on ubiquitous communication. Who's keen on ubiquitous communication? Okay, just one. You'll see towards the end of the talk if you're keen on ubiquitous communication or not. So some of her goals is to be able to understand Graql at a high level, but also easy to learn and understand her stakeholders and be able to communicate them. So a two-way journey where the stakeholders ask her something in English, and she writes a Graphical Query from that, or if she's asked about a query, she can explain that query in English, a Graphical Query, I mean, in English, what it does, what it means, why it does what it does. So let's look at English-to-Graql. I have a Graql console client, which I built to demonstrate that. So if someone's going to hold the microphone for me, I can quickly show. Thank you, Archie. So I'll show you some screenshots. This is how you kick off the application. And when you do that, you come to this prompt, which I'm going to quickly show. I can make it bigger. The only thing is the screen is I've got to do all of this. So this is the prompt where you can type in an English sentence, and I've already created the English sentence I want. And so when you do that, it actually responds back to you saying, hey, I actually run this sentence for you, and I found queries that were in my database, and I feel there's a 50-50 chance that one of these are right. And so you got to help me and choose which one do you want to actually use. So I'll say, since I'm just going to blag it, I'm going to just say 1. And so he says, oh, actually, I know this query, and I'm going to write this query for you, and this is the query I'm going to execute for you. And in 5 seconds later, it actually gives me the answer that, and it tells you how many seconds, and the answer is right here. Well, which isn't really in the form we want, but it's something it returns. But let me ask another question. So I'm going to ask another question. I'm going to say, all the calls made from London or Cambridge. So if you see the first one looks more like the call we were thinking about. So I'm going to just say the first query. And so it says, hey, I know the query you're talking about. I've already done this before, so I'm going to run it for you. And so it comes back. Again, it's not really the answer we are looking for, because somehow it's giving a different result. When I was running this, I can show you that some of the results, like if you had this screen here, you could choose the option, and then the result would be something at the bottom here that you can see. Sorry, the screen is not really high resolution, but if you look in the slides, you can see that was what the result was when it came back with the result. And similarly, the second query was that, and that was the result at the bottom. And then you had another query, calls related to, which I can enter now again. And hopefully this comes up with some response and not what it was saying earlier. So I'm going to choose 0. And again, it's not giving you the right response here on my screen, but if you look on the slides when I had taken the screenshots, it actually, because it was a repeat query, it goes and picks up the query from the cache, the results from the cache, and it shows you the results. And you can see, if it's not very clear, the middle section is where the answer is. It's a list of all the 4 numbers that are pertaining to that query. And you can see the query is at the bottom here on the last line. The calls related to September 10th or 14th, and it thinks these are the phone numbers. And you can see a query that comes from the cache is much quicker than the query that comes from the server. Obviously, it has to process it. And so there is that facility built in here as well. But you can also put in a Graql query. Let's try that and see what happens. I'm suspecting it's going to show me some response that I'm not expecting, but it does then execute the query as it is. So, and this time actually it comes back, luckily we can see it processing properly. It comes back with a number that we are looking for. This is the average or the mean of the call time of all those customers based on the query, because that's the query, and of course you have to read it and understand what's going on. It's, I think all the people under the age of 20 making calls who have a contract with the telecom company, and the rest of the query you can see yourself. So that, as I started showing Jazz that, and that was the response, she was also interested, what if I type in any garbage, let's say, so let's try doing that. So I say, yeah, let's try doing that. So you can endlessly type whatever you want, but you got a human-like response back from the system instead of failing or giving error messages. And every time it's a different message with a different twist. And so we want to see, I can actually take this for you. Thank you very much. So she's curious. She says, now I see this in console and it's great, but I want to see this happen in workspace. I don't know if Sauresh is in the room here somewhere. I think he's hiding away. That's his baby. He works on this day and night. And so I'm sorry, really, the resolution of the image is not really great. But if you look on the slides on your phone, you can see that you typed in an English sentence there, which you will see in the next slide in a second. And it gives you a graph like that, which is like this. I hope you can read that. That itself is not very clear, but if you can see in the slides, it's the English sentence you wrote, show me the schema. And it shows you the schema graph, but it also writes you in English, this is the query that you would normally type to get the schema, not the English sentence. And so that's basically the Graql to English, or English-to-Graql story. And by this time, Jazz was already thinking of all the different ideas she had about if her stakeholders asked questions, where to go, and what to use, and how to deal with those English questions that she had to write Graphical queries for, which she loves doing, but it's easier to write in English. But she said, but I actually read on your blog post, which I haven't written yet. I don't know where she gets the idea from, that Graql to English is also possible, and you've been doing this and not telling me about it. I said, okay, right, fine. Let's pick up a Graql query. Is everybody able to see that? Okay, again, the slides will come into handy if you have them before you. So this is a Graql query. It's easy to read, actually, if you spend a little bit of time. It's 8 lines. If you drop off the first line, it's actually 7 lines. So let's decompose this step by step. If I had to literally write the meaning of each of those lines in English, what is it? Find customers of type person with attribute person number, populated, meaning valid entries, find a company whose attribute name is telecom, and so on and so forth. Fine, but I think there's a lot of verbosity in that sentence. I can condense it a little bit more, right? I can say find a company by the name telecom and customers who have a contract with this company, and find the customer, and so on and so forth. But this, again, has an element of verbosity in it, right? Well, I can condense that further because or I can remove all the extra words and the buffer words and the stop words, and in the English language or any language is such that we use a lot of these buffer and supporting words to create a long sentence. But if I remove them and just keep the essence, then you see I just have this number and the dates that are of importance, and all the other buffer words are just supporting those numbers and dates. So that's still 2 sentences, and it's still got a little bit of verbosity in it. We can still condense it further. I think everybody can read this because I can read it from here. Since September 10th, which customers called number so and so? And actually, in essence, if you drill backwards, we'll see actually it makes sense, right? But she says this is a similar thing at another stakeholder would ask her at a meeting or through an email. So I said, yeah, this whole process we just went through just now, does it not sound like it's a summarization process? And then she said, yeah, it kind of looks like it. And I referred her to some of my NLP summarization notebooks that I created earlier. And the links are available for everybody. And so if we had to recap quickly what we just went through with the English-to-Graql and Graql to English process, then one thing is very clear for me is there is no one-hop solution. How many of you agree with that? I hope I'm clear about what I'm saying by what I mean by this, there's no one-hop solution. If I'm not, let me explain to you what I mean by there is no one-hop solution, because this is what I hear in the data science and the software engineering and all the tech communities. Oh yeah, we can use this and we can solve that. Or if you install that, it'll do that. Or let's build a model. Or let's use something that's out there in the NLP world that everybody is talking about, like for example, BERT or something, and that's going to solve your problem. Why don't we do that? No. That's because if we saw the journey went through, right from the first query all the way to this single line of sentence, and if you iterate through them backwards and forwards slowly, you will see that we gain and lose clarity and intent. How many of you agree with that? We lose also details. And that's just the part of the process. There's nothing bad about it. It's just how it is, right? If you want to express something in another language where the vocabulary is different, you need to build up to that vocabulary, right? And if you want to, again, use it in another language where the vocabulary is more terse, you need to build down to that language. So, and this is nothing negative or anything about anything. Each of these play a role in each of the processes. So if we go towards the query, then we have to build up on the vocabulary. If you come down to the English sentence, like a terse sentence like this, which has enough information in it for a human being to process it, we don't have much of the database-related information in here. We have to build it up, and that's what we were trying to do. We were building it up slowly till we got to the query, and the other way around as well. So this is my other way of explaining it. If we really had to look at the bird's eye view of what's happening within the transition between English-to-Graql and Graql to English, in between there are probably multiple layers of abstraction. I only showed you 3 or 4 ways of translating between Graql to English and English to Graql. And I think that work needs to be done on both ends, and also with the help of the community to make this transition smoother and more accurate rather than what we're trying to do by just trying to translate something from Graql to English. Before this, I actually want to show you really quickly a notebook. Archie, would you mind that I've been working on? Hopefully this notebook is not going to give up on us like the presentation earlier. Can you all read that? I think you cannot. Can you now read it? Perfect. So this is a, I'm not going to show you all the details. This is a graphical query. This is Python, actually. How many of you are familiar with Python? Probably half of the room. Oh, everybody in the room. Okay. That's Python there. Correct me if I've done anything wrong, but actually it gives me results, so it might be right. That's a graphical query there. You all know what it is. It's one of those queries I fed into the console where it didn't give me an answer, or it gave me some answer. I do some processing. I split it into different lines. You can see that. And I do something else. Those 3 dots are there. You can't see it now. Maybe later on. And I do some more processing. And you see, I have translated that graphical query into English. I have done a bit of cheating here because there's more layers of abstraction that I should have gone through because I didn't have the time, because I just had 30 minutes before I could get here. I had to really quickly jump shot those. I wouldn't do that if I had to do a real product in production. I would take my time, weeks or whatever. But I could do this in 30 minutes, but if I did it diligently, I think I can do the same thing more effectively, which would work for everybody in a longer period of time, but would give you similar results or better results than this. This is still verbose, but it still explains the query. That means the Graql, the language, has the information in it to write things in English. It's a little bit condensed, because that's what the machine needs to know. As human beings, you can add the extra buffer words and get this result. So with that, we go back to our presentation. Oh, yes, Suresh. I do have to do a shout out because some of the things, I won't tell which ones, I think Suresh knows. Some of the things I've done in the presentation are built up on the back of some of the work he did. He didn't realize it when he did it, but I immediately saw the potential of taking it from there and doing the Graql to English, English to Graql transition. So I did tell him earlier that I'm going to give you a shout out. I didn't have it ready in the slides, so I quickly got the link and I thought this is the best thing to do. Sorry, somebody wanted to take a picture of Suresh? Yes, please. Sorry, I was too quick. I saw that happening there, but I got so many things happening around here. I hope it's clear enough for Twitter. So that was the end of conversation with Jazz. She was all blown away because this is what she does in a day job, and now it's automated. She now doesn't have to do much Graql, although she loves it. And so we finished the conversation, and I left the lobby. And I was thinking, does she have a time machine? Is she from the future? Because it looks like she's seen things before I've even published them out. And who knows, somebody has a time machine and found out information about things I'm going to be doing. So that's it. Thanks, Archie. With that, let's summarize what we've actually been looking through. We saw the Grakn server. We saw how you can improve its performance. We also said we don't want to just take information and apply it without thinking, so please apply some critical thinking. And you can see Grakn works out of the box. I feel it's versatile and easy to adapt. Similarly, Graql, the language, we saw how we could do a two-way translation from English to Graql and Graql to English. And although some of the work I've shown you just now is still toy product, it's still a POC, I think if we put some energy into it and have the community step into it as well, we can make it more realistic and make it part of a layer on top of Grakn. Grakn is the building block for all of the nice stuff that we've been talking about all morning and maybe and tomorrow as well. But this, what I'm proposing, is like a layer on top of that. So we're not trying to change Grakn. We're not trying to change Graql. We're trying to build a layer on top of that, an abstraction on top of that. Of course, I would think that the great folks at Grakn Labs will take some feedback from there and go back and change some of the stuff themselves. Leave that for Heikel and his good folks to decide. The last thing I want to show you, talk about, which is very important for our community, the data science community and the engineering community, is we can solve problems using simple pattern recognition for simple problems. Who agrees with that? We don't need to do an NLP model. We don't need to run BERT or Roberta or whatever those variants are, or Magento, or whatever they are. And that's what I've done. If I show you some of the code is online, but some of the code is in the notebook, which you cannot see. You will see that it actually fits that last sentence. And my other conclusion is I think Al and Jazz are happy users because they're using Grakn and Graql. Who agrees with that? We haven't finished yet. We've got another 30 minutes to go. Joking. So closing notes, none of this is possible, especially the great work the Grakn Labs folks are doing. They cannot do it themselves. They're only 13 odd people. We need more people to support that work, and I recognized some of it, and so I started working on it early in March. I have probably some vested interest in it, which is just doing a lot of open source work for free. That's not going to happen for a long time. And I want to thank the community, firstly, for all the support that I've got, but I also lend forward and request the community to step forward and collaborate with some of the things I'm doing. I can't do this by myself, all by myself. I need more thinkers around it as well, and more skills. At the same time, Grakn Labs needs also similar or more support to do some of the milestone stuff they have been working on. And so please come forward and talk to us. Talk to the good folks at Grakn Labs. You can talk to me about some of the things I'm doing. That's why it's in red. It's more important. Joking. I've been rattling a lot about the resources. This is finally the list of resources. But this is just the starting point. This is just the scratch on the surface. There's a lot more to know that's out there about graph databases and everything else connected to it.